And if you're a good corn grower and you have the isolation, you heard that word come from Jan first, and I'm glad she mentioned it because I failed to. Isolation is important if you're growing seeds for Baker Creek Seeds. Different crops require different isolations in order to keep them from cross-pollinating. So it's not only the seed quality, but the type that it will produce. We want heirloom seeds to be true to type and produce the same phenotype, which is how it looks, how the progeny looks, the progeny looks as the parent. So we want the offspring to look the same as the parent. If they get crossed with another variety, that's not going to happen. By isolating the distance one variety is grown from another of the same crop type, you can minimize and mitigate the chances of cross-pollination that's going to affect the subsequent generations. Okay, so we have to have it what's called pure. Pure means that the offspring will look the same as the parent, and then when we put it in a packet with our picture on the packet, you guys can expect to get that, okay, when you grow it. If it gets crossed, you're going to get something else, and we're going to get called by you, right? Especially if you're growing for market and you were intending to have a red tomato and some cherry orange tomato comes out that you can't sell. So you're going to be pretty upset with us. So I need to have my growers isolate their crops. Watermelon isolation, we require 1 mile of isolation for watermelon. Corn, I want 5 miles of isolation for corn. And the reason is that it's different for different crops is just based upon the outcrossing potential. Some crops are self-pollinating. Many beans are self-pollinating. So I want my growers just to, for many beans to have just 50 feet. Many tomatoes, if they're just regular leaf tomatoes, they have a small, tight flower. And they only need to have, again, just 50 feet of isolation between varieties. And that's probably even extreme. But to ensure that they aren't cross-pollinated. Potato leaf varieties, which have a larger flower, where the reproductive components of the flower extend beyond the end of the flower in the closed position, that's accessible to bees. Those can get cross-pollinated over greater distances because they can get that pollen and transfer it to another. So we want 500 feet between potato leaf varieties of beans. Many peppers, we want 500 feet between our peppers. I started to say about corn and then I got off track. Corn pollen is very lightweight and it's got a lot of surface area, so it will be lifted up and it is viable for long periods of time, and it can travel long distances and be contaminated. 5 miles is what I want for isolation. Same with beets. And corn and beets are also exacerbated because of all the GMO crop out there. It's the two most populated or popular, if for lack of a better term, GMO crops there are. We cannot have any GMO in our seeds. We are a zero tolerance GMO company, and I like it that way. GMO is a dangerous and negligent science, if for lack of a better term again, and we shouldn't be doing it. But in order to ensure that we're not getting contamination in our beets and our corn, 5 miles of isolation. So different crops require different distances.
Can I mention something?
Yeah, say
one
anything.
of the great ironies at this particular time in history is that corn that is GMO-free, and this also applies to ancient grains, is really more valuable as a food than as seed. We could sell our Native American corn to restaurants for vast sums of money. These guys want it. We just can't grow enough of it. And this is kind of ironic, but our stuff is, as you well know, any of our corns are GMO completely free. I mean, we got corn from Native Americans back in the 1970s, and we promised them never would we ruin this, and so we're sticklers on it. One of the good things about growing corn in our region is that in our particular area, we're suburban Philadelphia. I mean, we're about 30 miles from GMO farming. It's big estates or houses and people growing, veggies in their backyard, but not much GMO corn. So we can. We want to use land at Tyler Arboretum. They're willing to give us 50 acres, and this is surrounded by an arboretum and then by a state park. So we've got about 6 miles of forests in both directions, and then suburbia. So this is like the perfect pocket to grow GMO-free corn.
Got good isolation there.
Yeah, totally. But there are chefs that would be willing to pay a huge sum of money for that corn to play with it on their menus, and we just don't have enough right now. This is one of the ironies of the market as it is. Sorry to interrupt you about
No,
that.
that's perfectly fine. I appreciate that comment because, yeah, and that's another thing you could consider in deciding whether or not seed production is for you. I wanted to quickly transition and change the subject in respect of everyone's time to this map. I alluded to it earlier. This is a distribution of, and I'll try to stand out of the way, a distribution of our growers across the country right now. Right about in this area is where we are right here. This is southern Missouri, and you can see that a lot of our growers are clustered around there. But just take a look at this. Draw a line across the continental U.S. Where do you see the majority of our growers at? They're in the northern part of the country, aren't they? And northern part of the country, guess what? Has a shorter growing season. And so this year in particular, at Baker Creek Seeds, this is the year of the pepper. Jared Gettle has decided he wanted to really add some wonderful Super Hot Star offerings. And so I've had to find a lot of growers for Super Hot Peppers. Well, you can't grow Super Hot Peppers up here in Montana. And so I try to find southern growers, and be honest with you, the southern growers were already loaded up with hot peppers, and they didn't have isolation on their farms to produce 2 peppers. Some of them did. You're doing 2, right? Or 3. Are you growing the Bueno Mulata again? You are doing it again, and I thought you had an excess crop, didn't you?
Oh, last year, yeah. I think I did have an excess crop.
And did I buy it, or?
Yes.
We did buy it, so
Yeah.
that worked out for her, and we mentioned that earlier.